Hey folks, welcome to my channel. My name is Dag, which is a nickname of course, and this is Dag the Aviator channel, and I do everything about aviation. I've flown models since about 1977, actually a little bit earlier than that, about 1973. I started flying control line when I was 10 years old. So I am a boomer, I'm an old relic, but my obsession lately, folks, has been with giant scale airplanes, like the last 15, 18 years. And these are planes like my Emmaselle 1 that had a 197-inch wing, my Emmaselle 2 that had a 188-inch wing, my Bronco OV-10, which has a 108-inch. Now the Emmaselle 1 and Emmaselle 2, I designed, engineered, and built those myself. This is called an ARF, almost ready to fly, which is kind of a joke. The airframe's built, but it still took me a month and a half to put all of the servos, motors, ESCs, install the landing gear and all that stuff, which is a lot quicker than me spending 2 or 3 years on like the Emmaselle 1 or the Emmaselle 2. But what we're going to talk about today, folks, is basically the top 10 things you need to think about as an RC pilot if you're going to be flying electric radio control airplanes. And folks, in the next week, I'll have a video popping up, which is going to kind of tackle more about LiPos. I did a video the other day on LiPos. It's always controversial, okay? But the thing is, I'm going to do a top 10 list. In those top 10 things that burn down your house, where do you think LiPo batteries fall within the top 10 list? Well, I'm going to do a video and tell you. So come back later, okay? Again, folks, I want to talk about electric model airplanes. But first, please like and subscribe. And if you're on the mobile app, hit the hype. Because the hype helps basically the YouTube algorithm understand that I'm getting out to model aviators, people who want to see this type of content. And it helps grow my channel, and this channel is solely to support my hobby or my addiction. Okay, so when we talk about electric airplane, folks, I've gotten some really neat emails from people when I talk about electric airplanes. And these are very young people or very old people who are brand new to the hobby. And because there's some different systems out there that are installed in these airplanes, it makes it very easy for a beginner. When I first learned to fly model aircraft, it was with a glider. I stood on a hill, I threw the glider away from me, grabbed the radio, and I would turn left and right. And I got really good at that. But then I used a thing called a high start, which is a big rubber band that shoots the glider into the air. When I came toward me, everything was backwards. Nowadays, with simulators and these smart systems that are on airplanes, it makes it so much easier to fly. One thing about electric, folks, is if you buy a store-bought electric airplane, pretty much it's ready to go. They can come as bind and fly, plug and play. There's all kinds of, they can come with their own radio. And the neat thing about that is you don't have to worry about mixing fuel or tuning the carburetor. You just go and fly. And the reason I fly electric is because of the sheer torque that you get out of the motor. Okay, with gas, you only get your power at a certain RPM range or glow. But with electric, it's linear, the torque. But I'm going to go through the top 10 things you need to consider if you're going to fly electric model airplanes. And folks, again, your mileage may vary. There are millions of opinions out here. Okay, I mean, honestly, what's the saying? Opinions are like assholes. Everybody's got one. I mean, it's a fact, okay? So, battery management is everything. Number one, battery management is everything. Your LiPo batteries are your fuel tanks. Always balance charge, store at proper voltages. Around 3.8 volts is what I store mine at. Never overcharge, ever overcharge them. And poor handling can shorten their life, or worse, cause them to become dangerous. And folks, one thing you need to know about LiPo batteries is I have over 5,000 flights without ever having a LiPo have a problem. I did blow the shit out of an A123 battery one time. I mean, I blew it up. But the thing is, folks, is if you properly handle LiPos, they are safe. But the problem is once they start to go like super critical, they can be a very hot, a very toxic, and a fire that propagates very quick. So I want to put that out there because, folks, I don't want you to think you can take a LiPo battery and just throw it in a drawer. There is certain things you have to do with the proper handling and carrying of LiPo batteries, okay? And never, ever leave one unattended when you're charging it. If you have really good chargers, if you have really good batteries and you've treated them great, still don't leave them alone when you charge them. Most of the LiPo fires I've heard my friends have was improper charging, using improper charger or a cheap charger off Amazon and walking away while it's charging. Once that battery starts to burn, if you don't have a fire blanket to lay on top of it, and if it's laying on top of your wooden workbench, your whole bench will probably be on fire. Folks, I just want to caution you. Like I said, I've had over 5,000 flights without ever having a LiPo problem. But if you're brand new to the hobby, follow everything it says when you buy that airplane about handling the LiPo, okay? Know your power system is number two. Number two, understand the relationship. And folks, look, I don't want to get too geeky on you. If you're designing and building your own airframes, you need to understand the KV, you need to understand the watts, you need to understand the load on the ESC, you need to understand the C rating of your battery. There's a lot you got to know. If you're buying a store-bought airplane, you don't need to know any of that. Just go out and fly and have fun. Just go out and start enjoying it, okay? Oh, and I forgot to tell you, one reason I'm sitting in front of my Bronco is I did a video the other day, and my number 2 motor, I thought had a bad rear bearing. It wasn't the rear bearing. When you look in the front of this, the front bearing is rusted up real bad. It looks like I had submerged this motor. I don't believe this motor has ever been underwater, okay? But it was my front bearing that was bad. So I plugged in the number 2 motor. I've tested it. Oh, and I'll talk about that in a minute, about safety with propellers and stuff. But it's really important, folks, that if you're building your own aircraft or you're like buying a flight test kit, which is a really neat thing to do, and you're buying your own motor, ESC, and battery, do some research, reach out to people like me, go to the forums and say, hey, look, folks, I'm wanting to fly this airplane. It weighs this weight. I want to fly aerobatics. So, you know, how many watts per pound do I need? Probably 150 if you're going to be doing aerobatics. And because this plane's about 125 watts per pound, and man, does it fly sweet. I might throw up a couple of pictures over there of it flying. Unfortunately, folks, I don't have a film crew. I don't have a lot of video of this plane in the air. I have some, but not a lot. And I want to get a lot more, but I've got tons of really cool kick-ass pictures. Okay, another thing, folks, is number 3, ESC setup and cooling. Now, I've got this closed up now, but I built air scoops in here. So as the air comes in the front, it's forced down over the motor to cool the motors. I think I have pictures. I'll put that up over here. But it's so important that you understand, if you're building your own airplane, how to keep that ESC cool. Some ESCs will automatically shut down when they thermal over temp. Other ones will just catch on fire, and then your airplane's on fire, and then you got a bad day. Be really careful and kind of test your system. I always oversize ESCs. These motors pull around 68 amps a side on 12S. I have a 120 amp ESC in there, so I have plenty of headroom. And if you're going to go to a fly-in for like a week, if you're going to like one of these long ones like Ceph or Joe Knoll or whatever you're going to, it doesn't hurt to take an extra ESC with you, okay? Most of the time, if you have an ESC blow, though, your airplane crashes. But if your plane makes it down, you got an extra ESC, okay? And folks, I've only had 2 ESCs in 5,000 flights quit. One caught on fire, the other one didn't. And the one that caught on fire, I still blame myself because I was having problems with that bastard. It wouldn't hold timing. It was a piece of shit, and I should have known not to put it in that airplane, and like a dumbass, I did it. 100% my fault, okay? But make sure your ESC has good airflow and it's sized properly, okay? Number 4, pre-flight checklist or pre-flight checks. I actually have a checklist, folks, that I have printed out, laminated, and carry with me that I do on most of my airplanes. But I'm also a full-scale pilot, okay? And flying what I call full-scale airplanes, not real airplanes, because this is a real airplane. It's a scale model of a real airplane. But if you're a full-scale pilot, you know how important the pre-flight checklist, the pre-taxi checklist, the taxi, the takeoff, all those checklists are really important. So just make sure that you check everything on the airplane. And I normally do it before each flight. I'll wiggle my L around. Folks, one of the things is if you have a really plastered hard landing and bounce, you're shaking the crap out of that airplane. I saw an airplane crash because the elevator just came undone. And the landing before it was really hard. And I feel bad because I should have went up to the guy and said, look, I'd check your airplane out. But sometimes, folks, you don't want to tell other people what to do. But he had basically broken all the glue on his elevator horn. So he's flying around and he went to pull up real hard and the horn came off and now he has no elevator and the plane crashed. And that's not a good day. So check your airplane, especially if you've had a really badass landing. And I'm doing a video on landings again, top 10 things you should do about landings. But you could always go around, okay? Center of gravity. And folks, this is a real, so look, this is a, how do I say this? This is a real bonehead thing I did. So I have a plane I call the lead sled, and it's my Avante. And I was talking to some friends about just experimenting with how much weight it would carry. Some people said, oh, it won't care about the weight. The other people said, oh, it's going to fly like shit if you add weight to it. So I decided to glass it, put on 50 coats of paint. I basically added like 1 pound and 4 ounces to my Avante. One of the things I didn't think about, I did check the CG after I painted it. Okay, that's not where it went wrong. Where it went wrong was when I put my battery in the plane, I had forgotten, because I hadn't flown it so long, exactly where I had my battery for my center of gravity. And I actually had the battery back way too far. So, I'm all feeling, okay, test flight, heavy airplane, let's see how it flies. It takes off and it just started going up and I'm just like, holy crap. And I'm going all the way forward in the elevator and I get it back under control. And the first thing you want to check on a tail heavy airplane is, are you going to porpoise? Or are you going to create a POI, pilot-induced oscillation? And normally, folks, if that happens, if there's like a cornfield around or a bean field or a hay field or something soft, bring your plane down as low as you can over that. Don't try to land on the asphalt runway, because if you come in, and a lot of times people just stall it. A tail-heavy airplane will fly with speed, but once it gets down to a certain airspeed, it just becomes almost unflyable. This airplane was almost unflyable, and I landed it, and I knew it wasn't the paint and the fiberglass and all the weight I put on it. I knew immediately I put my battery in the wrong location. So take a little marker and put the battery in the airplane, check the CG, make sure the plane's exactly what the manufacturer recommends, and then go in there and make marks on your battery tray where your battery is. That way, when you put the battery in every time, you know it's going exactly where you tested the CG at. Now, if the plane flies and you have a hard time rotating it when you land, it's nose heavy. Only move that battery back 1/8 of an inch at a time until you find a sweet spot where it's happy to fly, okay? You don't want to jerk around with center of gravity. Flight time awareness. Now, there's a lot of controversy in this, folks. I've had a lot of people, folks, I've really learned not to care what people say if what they're saying is irrelevant. This is basically a $4,000 airplane by the time you put everything in it. It's got 16 servos. I mean, the kit's like $2,000. The landing gear was another $500. This is not an inexpensive kit. And the first thing I do is when I program the ESCs is I turned off the low voltage cutoff. And what happens when you're thinking about flight time awareness, if you've got a little Cessna or something that will glide really easy, that's kind of a slow plane, you're not that worried about it. You can have it set, the ESC setup, that if you hit a certain low voltage, it just shuts off the motor. Now, if you cycle your throttle, you've got power back. But if you go to full throttle and it sees too much current, it's going to shut back off again. And not all ESCs are like that, but some are. I turn the low voltage cutoff. I would rather destroy the batteries in this airplane and get the plane back on the ground safely than to be flying around and forget how long I'm in the air and just have the motors turn off. And then me sit there, jerking around the stick trying to get it to stay in the air. Now, of course, there's timers on your radio. If your radio doesn't have a timer, go to Amazon, buy a little countdown timer, and just clip it to your radio. Okay, what I normally do is I go up for 3 minutes on my first test flight. I land, I check the voltage of the battery. I take off at 4.2-ish volts. It's normally like 3 point, you know, like 1.9 or 3.2, 3.18, you know, I'm sorry, 4. So you got 4.19, 4.18, or 4.20 is what my packs look like when I check them to see if they're balanced. Okay. And before every flight, folks, I grab my batteries and put in my little meter and make sure, A, I really charge that battery. B, I don't have a bad cell. Okay. So I take off, fly 3 minutes, land, sometimes 4 minutes. Depends on if I know I've got plenty of headroom. I'll check my voltage. On this airplane, I did a 4-minute flight. When I landed, everything was 3.9 volts, which means I had probably another 3 or 4 minutes. I can fly this plane at 6 minutes, and that's scale. If I'm going to be doing fast flybys and firewalling it, of course my voltage is going to drop quicker. There is telemetry you can hook up to hear how many milliamps you're pulling and all that stuff. But if you're a newer pilot, that's who this video is kind of for. I don't know if you're going to have all that telemetry hooked up. I at one time had airspeed, altitude, all this stuff in my ear plugged into my radio, and it drove me completely apeshit. It was like, okay, get rid of that crap, you know. But on a 6-minute flight, I land and I still have 3.75 to 3.78 volts, which will give me probably 1 or 2 go-arounds. But I would rather destroy my batteries than destroy the airframe, okay, when it comes to time awareness and your batteries. Safety with props. Folks, this is so important. When I put this new motor back on, and I needed to check to see if the rotation's right, I don't have a propeller on this. I hooked everything up, it turned the right direction, then I put the prop on it. If you're ever playing around with adjusting anything on your airplane, and you want to test the ESC or test the motor and run it up and down, do it without the prop. And make sure everything's right. Then you can put the prop on. If you need to do a full power run up, have somebody hold it, but you stand behind it. Folks, if you Google Ginsu knives, back in the 80s, there was a commercial where this guy would cut up a tin can, and then he would cut a steak or cut tomatoes. It was one of the sharpest knives you could buy on the internet, okay? These carbon fiber props on our electric planes are basically Ginsus. They are going to put you in the hospital if you're not careful with that prop. Oh, and another thing is, most radios you go into, you have what's called a throttle cutoff, or you have where you can pick motor. On mine, when you pick motor, you can assign that cutoff switch to a switch on the plane, and if that switch is in the wrong position, let's say I'm firing up the airplane, I'm firing everything up, and my radio is armed for the motor. It'll beep at me. It'll chirp at me 3 or 4. Oh, no, actually, it just keeps chirping until I flip that switch. You want to have a way to disarm these motors when you are getting ready to fly. You don't want hot motors. And another thing, folks, is as soon as you land, disarm the motor and unplug those batteries. Because, folks, you don't want to accidentally arm it, hit the throttle with your knee or something, and hurt somebody else or hurt yourself. Okay? Understand throttle management. So I do a test on every large airplane I have. And you've got to be very careful doing this because for me, it's a scary flight. Once I got 5 or 6 flights on this and I know everything's right, I do what I call a full throttle flight. I take off at full throttle, leave it at full throttle, and I will fly for about 2 minutes, just at wide open full throttle and land, and then check my voltage. And believe it or not, if I leave this at full throttle for 2 minutes, my batteries are down to 3.7 volts. Okay? So if you're going to fly around full throttle, you may not have that much of a flight time. But when I cruise around scale, I get a 6-minute flight with about a 2-minute reserve. And folks, I played around one time and flew around. This plane flies so good. Hangar 9 hit a home run with this airplane. This wing, this airfoil is so efficient. I flew around at about 30% power one time and got to about 8 minutes and then landed and checked my voltage, and it was still 3.8. So if you fly at a really low RPM, don't get too slow and stall the airplane. You'll be amazed how long of a flight you will get. Another thing is, landing gears and flaps on electric airplanes are big air brakes. If you're as anal as I am about this stuff, you will notice, you're in the downwind, I drop 1 notch of flaps. I get close to turning base, drop the gear. Confirm the gears down in base. Or I'll do a flyover with the flaps at 1 notch, Then I'll turn crosswind, drop the gear. Then I'll enter the downwind, drop full flaps. You're going to be holding about 30 to 40% power just to fly the airplane with all that drag. But you're using a lot of milliamps doing that. So now I'm on final, I'm getting down, it gets squirrely or the wind kicks up, and I'm like, uh-oh, I've got to go around. Immediately pull the gear up, and I immediately, as I'm adding back to full throttle for the go-around, I always go to full throttle for the go-around, pull up one notch of flaps. Not full flaps up. I mean, not from full flaps all the way up. This plane landing has 60 degrees of flaps. Taking off has about 25 degrees of flaps. It'll fly fine at 25 degrees of flaps. But you got to realize you were using a lot of milliamps. When that gear's down, that flap's down, you have a lot of drag in this airplane. This sink rate on this airplane is scary, folks. If you just pull the engine back to idle, you're like the space shuttle. You got the nose down like this to keep up enough airspeed to have enough flare out. Because I've also tested a couple of dead stick landings on this, folks. Even though this is the greatest airplane I've ever flown, dead stick where you just got it idle, you've got to really be coming downhill, carry that speed, and then land the plane. You need to worry about depending on your airplane, electric. If it's a little bit light foamy, and there's a lot of wind, or there's just weather, it may be a handful to fly. This pig's 48 pounds. It doesn't care about the weather, okay? This thing flies great. But if you got some little foamy, I got a couple little foamies, and if it's windy at all, it's almost no fun to fly. And then post-flight disciplines. Always unplug your batteries. Always do a quick check. If you can reach in and touch your ESCs, like I can stick in here and finger this thing right here, and I can feel my motor. I always go back in and check. Now my fingers are stuck. I can always go back in there and see how hot my motors are running. I do have a little thermal gun. And when I first flew this, folks, I flew it on a 22-inch 10-pitch prop. Motor is way too hot. I'm now running a 1913, and motor is much, much better. And one day, folks, I'll do a video, but I know everybody's going to just go ape and tell me I'm full of crap. But folks, there's a lot of data to prove that a higher pitch prop on electric's nice, because we don't have to hit an RPM horsepower range like on a 2-stroke or a glow or a gas or a 4-stroke. Electrics, their torque is linear. And I've experimented with this, and I'll do a video on it, but I know a lot of people are going to say I'm full of crap. I really don't care. I'm not in this to please everybody. I'm in this to have fun, right? So, folks, that's kind of the video here. That's the top 10 things. To recap, battery management, know your power system, ESC and cooling, pre-flight, center of gravity, flight awareness, safety of the props, understand throttle management, weather and wind sensitivity, post-flight discipline. Okay, and that should all be over here. And, of course, folks, put what you think about the video in the comments below. If you think I'm full of crap, tell me. Keep it constructive, because, folks, I don't mind criticism at all as long as it's constructive. I love to share things in an open kind of public forum that helps other modelers learn how to fly. Again, your mileage may vary. You might say, well, Damon, you missed 11 and 12 and 13. Great. Put them in the comments below. But again, please like and subscribe. And if you're on a mobile app, hit the hype, because I'm really trying to build this channel now, folks. I took a year and a half off of it because my real job, I work in the entertainment industry. I basically led a project for a year and a half of a new product, and I walked away from my YouTube. I'm back, I'm full throttle, and I'm here to stay. So rock on, have a great day. Hope you appreciate the video. See you next time. Bye-bye.